As you're quickly going to see, Vanessa's actually not here today. And no, it's not a solo podcast. We've got a special guest, my mom.
Hi.
So for us, we're actually going to start with a book that doesn't mention God at all. Do you know what book that is?
I don't.
The book of Esther is the only book
Really?
in the entire Bible that doesn't mention God's name at all. And so we're going to talk why that is. We're going to talk about why that is, but we're going to talk about kind of the significance behind that a little bit more. So I'm not basically my verse here is going to be talking about that idea overall. Okay. But specifically we're going to kind of start with a verse in chapter 5. So let me give some context first, and just so the YouTube video is good, I like to kind of give a little bit of an intro. So I'll start the YouTube video right at the intro and kind of make everything work, if that makes sense. So Esther is the only book in the Bible that doesn't use the name of God, right? So in all of the other books, we hear God's name, we see him doing things, but in Esther, he's not mentioned, and he doesn't seem to appear in Esther at all. And so I want to talk about this idea as a whole, right? Like, why is this? How does this affect us? What can we learn from this, right? But let me start with a little bit of the book of Esther. We're going to start in chapter 5, right at the beginning of chapter 5, and just see how Esther is kind of dealing with things, just for kind of a context for everybody that hasn't read Esther. Esther is a Jewish woman, along with her uncle Mordecai, who is kind of helping her go through life, essentially. The king is looking for a new bride in their area, and he ends up choosing Esther as his queen, okay? So Queen Esther is then able to save the Jews from the evil Haman, who tries to destroy all of the Jews, and she's able to save the Jewish people, right? This is where we get the festival of Purim. If you've ever heard of that in Jewish culture, Purim is the celebration of the Jews being saved by Esther from the evil hands of Haman. And so chapter 5, we see this at the top here. It says, "On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting in his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter, and said to the king, and the king said to her, 'What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you, even up to half my kingdom.'" So Esther goes on to kind of give these different requests, and the story continues there. But I wanted to start here because I love this imagery for how a king responds to someone coming in his court, even his own queen, right? And so if we know the culture of this area, essentially you can think of it this way. So anybody that enters the courtroom, right, especially to ask something of the king, they're in real danger, because if they do anything wrong, like, they could immediately be killed for any reason, right? Like, the king has he's above the law. He is essentially a god in their kingdom, right? And especially in this realm where it's not, a Jewish society, it's not a Christian society, obviously. And so as she steps into the courtyard to ask something of him, he raises his scepter and allows her to come in. Right. And so we're seeing that he has affection for her, that he sees her, that he is allowing her to make this request in the first place. Right. And so it's interesting, the relationship that she has throughout this whole book of, the king seeing who she really is, acknowledging her and allowing her to kind of take these moments to save the Jews, right? And that's just a piece of Esther. But again, my focus that I want to focus on is really on the whole book and how we don't see God's name in that, right? But we see moments like this. We see moments like just these crazy things happening over and over and over again, where it's like, that's like, it just can't be a coincidence, right? It just can't be chance. It just can't be luck. These things happen again and again and again that allow Esther to not only become queen. First of all, she's chosen as one of the prospects, right? Then she becomes queen. Then she's able to make these requests. Then she's able to actually take over everything that Haman used to have once he's out of the picture, right? And so there's all these little things that just pile up over and over and over again, showing us that God is working,
Right.
that God is doing things, that God is present, even if his name is not said in the book, right? And so then we kind of extrapolate that to us, and it brings us to like, okay, how do I do that in my life? How do I see God even when I don't necessarily acknowledge his presence, right? Or when people around me don't acknowledge his presence. And I kind of wanted to start at that point. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, if you would just subscribe to our channel, we're really trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and we're so close. You could help us out by just clicking that button real quick. Thank you so much.
I mean, throughout the Bible, especially in the beginning of the Bible, it talks about how Israel is, God's made a covenant with them.
Yeah.
And even though it may not say God's personhood in the Bible of Esther, in the book of Esther, it is evidently clear that he has a covenant with these people.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just so many moments in here. And I think of my life, like, now that you're here, especially, like, I see my life and the moments in my life with my dad, or just the different things that have happened throughout my life.
Yeah.
And for me, like, there's statistics that are kind of baked into who I am, right? Like, I should be this, I should be that, I should have done this, I should have gone here. Like, however, God intervened, and completely changed the way that the trajectory of my life, right? The trajectory of where I should have gone according to the stats, or according to, the world. And so it always blows my mind to see how God moves, even in those quiet moments, and see how he, the favor of God is always like a weird word. A lot of people kind of misuse that. I think they kind of use it as like this, almost like plot armor, if you ever heard of that. Like like in a story, like a hero will always have like this plot armor of like, he can never get hurt, right? And I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think that people have plot armor in the world. There's always going to be hurt and pain. But I can feel that God has used me even when I have not been put myself in a place to be used, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So like when I sin, or when I have struggles in my life, or when I'm not obedient to God, he still chooses to pursue me. He still chooses to use me, even when I may deem myself unworthy, right? Even when I may deem myself not good enough for what his plan is.
Well, it's kind of interesting that the scripture that I picked also goes along with what you're saying. So I don't know if you want me to read it.
You can if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was kind of thinking along the same lines. One of my favorite thoughts is that God knew me, and just he actually built me from before time. Like he knew who I was going to be. He knew the personality that I was going to have. He knew everything about me. And because of that, I trust that he is sovereign, and I trust that he has good plans for me. So in Psalms 139, 13 through 18, it says here, For you formed my inner parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you. When I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were numbered for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If you would count them, they are more than the sands. I wake and I am still with you. And, throughout my life, just knowing that God knit me, that God had a plan for my life from beginning to end, and that, and it wasn't just me, it was my kids. Like I see in your life, Brandon, just the hand of God all over your life. I've always known that. I've always felt that. God just, he really blessed me in that I have some really amazing kids. But I could see that from a very young age, God just, he called you to him.
Yeah.
From a very young age. And I see that passage all over your life. And it's just, there's some passages in Scripture that just give us comfort. And that is one of them, because I know no matter what, no matter how difficult things are or how good things are, that God is sovereign.
Yeah.
And that he has a plan for my life. He has knit me together. He has placed in me gifts and talents, and that he, they say that there's a scripture that says, if he is for you, who can be against you? And I do, and I trust that. When things are really tough, I can't imagine being in the world and not having a grounding of, being in a relationship with Jesus Christ, because
100%. Yeah.
When things get hard, like who would you go to?
Right. Yeah.
Like when things are really rough, or if things are uncertain, like it is my joy to go in front of the throne and say, Lord, I'm just broken right now. I need you, and he is there.
Yeah.
He gives me the strength. He gives me the wisdom. He allows me to see a path. And I have no idea how that would feel without Christ in my life.
Yeah.
From a very young age, I remember, and, this is a story that I'm sure a lot of other people have had in their lives, but, I came to know Christ at the age of 5. And I thank God for the men and women that God put in our lives in a little church in New England, in an Assembly of God church. And it was through a VBS program that God just called me. It was so clear, in that moment that it was, he was calling me to him. And, since that time, he has never left me nor forsaken me. Now, as a human being, have I had my ups and downs, and have I sinned?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the journey.
Yeah.
That's part of the story. But God's always been faithful. Always.
Yeah, and I think the hope that you're talking about, like, it contrasts with the dark side of things, which is why we have this show and why we talk about things the way we do. We always talk about the name of this channel, but it's important to us because of that, right? Following Jesus is better, not easy.
Absolutely.
And so the Better Not Easy podcast, that's the whole reason why we do this, is because, yes, the world is fallen. There are horrible things that happen. You're going to mess up. You're going to cause pain. You're going to cause suffering. You're going to want to walk away from God because that's your flesh nature, and that is what happens in a fallen world. However, there is a hope, right?
There absolutely.
However, there is a light at the end of that. And just like you're saying, like, I can't imagine what I would do.
No.
Like, honestly, and a lot of people that aren't Christian, like, I think they imagine this is some sort of, like, I don't know what they imagine. It's like they must think it's fake in some way, right? But honestly, there's no greater joy, there's no greater freedom that I've ever found other than in Christ, right? And so me living in that gives me so much peace.
Absolutely.
And while I still have struggles, while I still like deal with things, that is what balances out my life, right? To allow me to walk in what Christ wants me to do, rather than just sitting in depression all day.
The nature of who humanity is. Like, I mean, I can only speak for myself personally, but, like, I know that without Christ in my life, I would be a much different individual.
Right.
You know, like, one of the things that I feel like is part of the nature of who I am is service and wanting to be a helper or be a somebody that comes along other people that are struggling. I mean, that's been something that it's been in my nature for a very long time, and to like mentor children. I'm a teacher, so those things are ingrained in me, you know, and part of that is because the character of Christ, you know, he wants us to reflect his nature. And as I grow and go through valleys, and when I go and have these moments or these time periods when things are really rough, I learn more about the nature of him, and that changes the nature of me.
Right.
You know, so he is perfecting us. He is growing us to be more like him each and every day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to Esther and wrapping all of this kind of together, it's like while we go through life, like these both of these things can exist at the same time. We can know that God made us in our mother's womb, that he knows every piece of us, that he loves us dearly, that his thoughts outnumber the sands, like his thoughts of us outnumber the sands. How crazy is that? You know, we can have that at the same time as, God, where are you? I don't feel you here. Like, because there's moments like that in our lives, even for Christians, even for believers, even for people that are, you know, following him. There are still moments of like, God, I don't hear you right now. God, I don't see you right now. But because of that former belief, knowing the person of who God is, then we believe and we understand that he is still moving. Just maybe not in the ways that we want him to or that we see him.
And then, like in Esther, like you're saying, like, so these are covenant people, but because of that relationship that God had with Israel and had with the people of his nation, he wanted things to be, he wanted things to work to the betterment of them, and they wanted to obey his laws and his, you know, the way that, I don't know what I'm just about to say.
No, his laws and his commands.
Yeah, his commands and stuff like that. So when you see that they're doing that, God's going to honor that.
Yeah.
You know, and in that story, that's what happened.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Queen Esther is put in that place of positioning because of that.
Yeah.
Because God knows that the way that she's going to deal with her husband is going to help the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you want to check out this full episode, you can do that on patreon.com/thesnipelife. This is the best way to help us to support what we're doing here on the Better Not Easy channel. Thank you very much.
Just remember that following Jesus is better not easy.